Hello. Next instalment is Chapter 5, The Odyssey, Part 2. So they've just arrived in New York. Then everything went very fast. That was how things moved in New York. Aunt Gloria told us all over her shoulder as she rushed us into a yellow taxi, which was big enough to fit 5 of us inside and smelt strongly of cigarettes. We raced down the motorway. It was called a freeway, shouted Aunt Gloria. Everything in the USA seemed to have a different name, which made me worry that I'd forgotten how to speak English while we were flying, and rushed across a huge iron bridge, honking and dodging all the other yellow taxis, which were also in a rush. The sun was burning in the sky. I thought of Helios and his chariot again, and the air was very still. Kat and Salim were talking very quickly and quietly, and both of them were ignoring me. My throat felt full. My school shirt stuck to my skin and my collar itched my neck. My hand flapped. Everyone else was oohing over the sights, but I kept staring down at my grey knees. They have not changed since May. I have grown, but only half an inch. Our garden still takes 12.5 steps to cross. Usually these thoughts make me happy, but now they didn't. I wasn't sure whether I'd fit into New York. Then the taxi stopped. I looked up, craning my neck out of the taxi window. We were in front of a tall red brick building with a staircase on the outside. We went inside, into a lift that clanked. My suitcase hurt my arm. Kat would not stop wriggling. The sharp corner of her rucksack hit my arm. Then Aunt Gloria opened the door, waved her hand and said, "Voila!" Voila is French for "here it is," but Gloria isn't French, so I don't know why she said that. I looked through the door and discovered that an apartment means flat. This flat was very small with wooden doors, and the living room and the kitchen were squeezed into one small space. 3 walls of the space were painted white, but one was still brick. I wondered if the builders hadn't finished it. Everything else, apart from the bricks and the floor, was very white. The sofa was white, and even the paintings on the wall were in shades of white. All the books and what Mum calls knickknacks were missing from the living room side of the room, and the kitchen side of the room was just a strip of cupboards and a long white table. I wondered if Aunt Gloria had forgotten to bring the things from her house in England, or perhaps there wasn't room for them all. That made me worried that there wouldn't be enough room for us. Our dear little apartment. It isn't much, but I hope you'll be happy here, said Aunt Gloria. Salim rolled his eyes and grinned at Kat. It isn't much, I agreed with Aunt Gloria. Ted, said Mum. He didn't mean that, Glow. Aunt Gloria laughed and said she was quite used to me now. That made me cross, because she had told us that it wasn't much. She hadn't given any warning she was using a figure of speech. I looked around the rest of the apartment and saw that my worry had been right. The whole space wasn't even half the size of our house. I could cross it in only 8 steps. There were only 2 rooms apart from the bathroom and the living room, that is also the kitchen. This meant that we had to share, and it was even worse than the time when Aunt Gloria and Salim had come to stay with us. Mum would be sharing Aunt Gloria's room, Kat would have Salim's, and Salim and I would be on futons in the white living room kitchen. This seemed very unfair to me, because Kat is one person, and there are 2 of me and Salim. But I thought about how I felt about Kat and Salim, and how I missed Salim and Ted, and decided that perhaps the arrangement would be good after all. It would give me time with just Salim. That was the afternoon of the 8th of August. The rest of the day was a blur because of jet lag. I fell asleep sitting on the sofa while Aunt Gloria and Mum talked, and then again at dinner. So did Kat, although she pretended she hadn't. I kept my special weather watch on British summertime so I could think about the weather at home, and when I woke up in the middle of the night from a dream where I was Odysseus lost at sea, I could tell that even though it was dark in New York, 1:07 a.m., it was 6:07 a.m. and getting light in London. There were 2 people whispering, Kat and Salim. Kat must have crept out of her room and into the living room. I kept very still and quiet and listened to them. I'm so glad you're here, whispered Kalim. I've missed you. I can't wait to show you the city. You'll love it. Mum's got you all subway passes for the week so we can go anywhere. New York, sighed Kat. It's so much better than London. I can tell already. I was indignant. This means upset, because nowhere is better than London. Seriously, said Salim, though I can't stop Mum hovering over me. She still thinks that, well, spring might happen again. Salim, like most people, uses words in a very imprecise way. Of course the spring would happen again. It happens every year as the earth goes around the sun. But I translated what he said into what he meant. Aunt Gloria was worried about him going missing again because of the time he'd gone missing before in London in May. And I told you about Mum and Dad, hissed Cat. Hissed is a word that is like whispered, but more angry, and it's a good word for the way that Cat sounded when she talked about them. They're being so stupid. I keep hoping I can get Auntie Glo to change Mum's mind. Yeah, and maybe Aunt Faye can tell Mum to calm down about me, whispered Selim. We'll work together, right? Right, whispered Cat. We're a team. I heard Cat getting up to creep back to her room and tried to breathe very quietly. My deductions had been correct. Cat and Selim had definitely been communicating. They were friends, working together, and there was no room for me. Just like my dream, I was as alone as Odysseus, floating on the wreckage of my ship. All my crew members drowned. Chapter 6. Acting Up. On Thursday the 9th of August, Aunt Gloria took us to the Guggenheim. She led us out of the apartment and down in the lift, putting her earrings on crooked and smearing lipstick over her mouth as we descended, telling us that the Guggenheim was closed to ordinary tourists that day because it was Thursday, but she wanted to take us to see it as a special private viewing, her words. She was helping with a new exhibition of paintings that was opening next week, the very first one that she had curated for the Guggenheim. For the rest of the time we were in New York, Aunt Gloria would be on holiday from working at the Guggenheim, so she could take us round the rest of the city and look after us. She was very excited about that, but I was disappointed. I had wanted to spend all my time in that Guggenheim so I could explore all the patterns that my encyclopedia had told me about. I watched Cat and Slim again. They bent their heads close together as they talked, taking the same size steps. My teacher, Mr. Shepherd, told me that when you're friends with someone, you mirror their movements and stay close to them, so I could confirm that this morning they were still definitely friends. Outside, New York felt even more confusing than it had yesterday. The buildings were taller than in London. They all had stairs on the outside. Everything seemed back to front, and even the people spoke differently. A man in a grey jacket with dark glasses over his eyes passed us on the pavement and said, "Morning, guys." He spoke through his nose, and when Aunt Gloria said "Good morning" back, I noticed that the tone of her voice had changed to be like a man's. It made me uncomfortable, and my hand flapped. Aunt Gloria was different this summer, just like Cat. I think Mum must have seen how I was feeling, because she put her hand out towards me and then put it back on her bag again and said, "Ted, look up." I looked up and realised that New York weather was moving in a pattern. I could understand it. That morning it was in a system of high pressure with high cirrus clouds. The rising temperature was making my school shirt stick to the back of my neck, just the way it had the afternoon before. I imagined the air above us being twisted by the Earth's rotation into a cyclone. This is called the Coriolis effect. It behaves the same everywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, which contains both London and New York. I thought about that similarity, and I was happier. Aunt Gloria hurried us through the hot square streets, which were too full of people and cars and whirling noise, until a wall of green appeared in front of us. It was a forest with paths under the trees and lots of people in tight, bright-coloured outfits, cycling and jogging. There were 5 different breeds of dogs and 7 babies in pushchairs, and my nose was full of the smell of grass as well as petrol. I made myself think through what I had seen in my encyclopedia, and I realised that we must be looking at Central Park. Central Park opened in 1876 and it's 843 acres large, which is almost 3.5 million square metres. It has a zoo, 29 sculptures and 7 lakes. It's even more famous than the Guggenheim. "Isn't it lovely?" cried Aunt Gloria, "and such a beautiful day. It's like it knew you were coming." She was wrong. The weather is not sentient, which means conscious or aware, and so it doesn't care about people. Aunt Gloria was fanning herself and Mum was panting. The sun was very hot now, and an area of high pressure sat above us like a thumb pressing down. My school blazer made my neck and arms itch. The pavements were hot and white. We turned down Fifth Avenue, which ran parallel to the park, and I saw that wide blue banners on the streetlights read, "Richard Pousset Dart, opening 17th of August. I recognised this name, and I realised this must be the new exhibition that Aunt Gloria was working on. The pedestrian crossing in front of us told us, "Do not walk," in bright orange stripes, but Aunt Gloria hurried us forward into the road anyway. There was a scream of tyres to our left, and a yellow taxi pulled to a stop, its driver leaning out of the window to shout at us. I felt Mum's muscles go hard under her skin, and she said to Aunt Gloria, "Glo, you might have got us killed. Oh, Faye, I'm sorry, Aunt Gloria panted. Her green toenails were squeezing themselves out of her very tight high shoes. The shoes looked painful to walk in. Perhaps that was why she hadn't noticed the taxi. Salim snorted air out of his nose. When I turned to look at him, his eyes were rolling. Mum, he said to me. She never looks where she's going. She's the one who needs looking after, not me. I said. I didn't know what to say to this Salim, who enjoyed New York and was friends with Kat, but not me. Salim wrinkled his forehead at me. Hey, Ted, he said, are you okay? I mean, you've been acting a little strange since we got here. I wanted to tell him that this was not true. I had been acting exactly the same as always, and it was everyone else who was acting strangely. Salim said, listen, I know why you're upset. When I first arrived, I hated it too, Ted. I really did, but I got used to it, and now I think it's great. You just need to get used to it, I promise. Get used to it, I repeated. Yeah, said Salim. His mouth was turning up in a smile. I love it now. And listen, all you've got to do is copy someone who looks like they know what they're doing. That's the way to fit in anywhere. That's how I fit in here. Just act. Act? I asked. I looked at Salim. His shoulders were back and his feet were apart, and one of his thumbs was stuck through the hoop of his jeans. I didn't have a belt loop, so I held my thumb out in front of my hip. I shuffled my feet apart and raised my neck to make my shoulders go down. Salim showed me more of his teeth as he laughed. Take your hand down, Ted. It looks like it's floating, but other than that, good. I was pleased. Salim and I had talked, and it had been a good talk. As we walked down the street parallel to Central Park, I copied Salim. My feet took big strides and my arms swung. Then Kat wrapped her arms around Salim's and dragged him away from me, talking loudly. But there had been a moment when Salim had remembered how to be Salim and Ted again, and I held on to that thought in my head.